If you're joining here on Facebook, drop into the chat who you are and where you're coming from. And just because it feels relevant all the time over the past couple of months, how you doing today? How about one word? One word about how you're feeling today. For those joining us on Facebook or on Zoom, go ahead and drop into the chat your name, where you're coming from, and one word on how you're doing today, how you're feeling today. My word, as people are joining, lots of people are dropping in here. It's good to see you. Folks coming in from all over the place. We got folks coming in from Kennewick, Texas. My friends from Houston ISD are here. Mr. Gerard, good to have you. People coming in from Bogota. Love having my friends from Colombia here. So good to see you. Iowa's in the building. Wisconsin, Katy, Texas, California, Tucson. Oh my goodness. Everyone is in the building. Illinois, Massachusetts, Spring Branch is here. Welcome. South Texas, Moorpark, California, Oregon. This is always such a brightening part of my day. Thank you, folks coming in from all over the world. Florida, joining today. I know that there are a thousand things where your attention could be right now, and plenty of things purposeful to pay attention to in the world. So I feel super grateful that you're here with me. If we haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Houston. I'm one of the co-founders of CharacterStrong, and I've had a chance over the past 10 years to work in schools all over the world. I've had a chance to work in buildings, about 600 schools, talking and thinking about things like kindness, compassion, empathy, how to build school cultures where people take care of each other, respect each other, and figure out not just how to do the academic side of things, but do the communal work as well. Show up and treat each other with dignity, humanity, and respect. And that's why I'm super thrilled that you're here today, is because at CharacterStrong, we have this fundamental belief that education is the #1 pathway to a more compassionate world. So much of what we're seeing play out in the world is rooted, we believe, in competency gaps. I think collectively, we deeply, naturally want to do good for ourselves and for each other, but so much of that is reliant on the skills that we are equipped with to navigate the ultimately really complex reality of living with ourselves and being in community with each other. So that's what today's about, thinking about that through specifically the lens of social emotional learning and character development through pre-K to 5th grade. How do we teach these things thoughtfully? How do we teach them purposefully? And how do we do it in a way that doesn't overwhelm an already busy reality in schools? So I want to give you a couple of highlights, some high-level thoughts about Purposeful People, which is our elementary toolkit, and then I will dig in. One of those thoughts is we know that a number of schools are tackling this work. As we look around the world, we're seeing the importance of it only escalate. Social emotional skills as we navigate this pandemic. What's it going to look like coming back to schools, whether that's virtually or in person? We know that this is not another thing on the plate, that this is the plate upon which we build everything else. So how do we put a focus on it? And we know that more and more, not only schools, but districts are thinking about this. How do we think about this district-wide? How do we have a common message and a common thrust? What can we do to scaffold this learning pre-K through 12th grade in a way that builds on each other? So one of the early learnings at CharacterStrong was we can't call it the same thing. So while our secondary material, and we do have content at the secondary level, is called CharacterStrong, our elementary content is intentionally branded totally different. It needs to look different, sound different, smell different, because if it does not, then students will go from elementary school to middle school and immediately dismiss it because they say, I've already done this, or this is elementary stuff, and now I'm an adult. I'm a middle schooler, so treat me like one. So first and foremost, we call it Purposeful People. In many ways, the name is an homage to some of the work we respect so much from Dr. Angela Duckworth, who talks about resilience and grit as key indicators of success in all of her research. What she's uncovered is that it is not SAT or GPA or IQ, those traditional metrics of success that actually make people successful in the world. She's discovered that it is the non-cognitive trait of grit, resilience, right? That character trait, that performance character trait of the ability to persevere over time towards things that we care about. And what she's uncovered in her work is that the number one common denominator of people who were resilient was that they had deep, clear purpose. They knew why they were doing what they were doing. And the clarity of that purpose was going to drive their persistence over time. So how do we wrestle with that? How do we help support young people with that? And how do we cultivate that for ourselves? That's why we call it Purposeful People, a pursuit towards cultivating that purpose through the lens of things like social emotional learning and character. What you'll notice, we're actually looking at the curriculum site right now, so you can get a little bit of a sense of what it looks like and how it operates on the back end. It's designed to be as user-friendly as possible so you can click and go. You come in here and you look over at the side, you see a couple of our different products, including our CharacterStrong Gym, which is a big library of resources for educators to sort of weave SEL and character into everything you do. We have our on-demand PD, which is a series of modules and units related to developing our own resilience, to responding to behavior through a functional lens, to cultivating hospitable soil in our schools so that we can nurture students through the lens of relationships. A bunch of good stuff in there. And if you haven't had a chance to check out our virtual assemblies or our virtual educator resources, just go to characterstrong.com/free resources and you get a chance to dig into those a bit more. One of the most beautiful things, beautiful gifts I've had a chance to participate in over the course of this time while I've been at home is assembling incredible speakers together for these weekly assemblies where we talk about things that matter, like patience. And we're able to dig into these concepts through the lens of other storytellers and musicians and speakers in my life. And all of these videos are totally free. And we found that adults tend to be just as inspired by them as students. So if you get a chance to watch them yourself or with your young ones, go ahead and check it out. In fact, I will drop this link right here into the chat if you're interested. This is totally free for you. All that being said, let's dive into Purposeful People. If you go to the overview page, it sort of outlines how we approached this work. And a couple of things to note right off the bat is we're focusing on 10 traits. These 10 traits, they didn't pop up out of thin air. We pulled these from survey data of students, families, and educators, asking the question, what skills do you want for yourself? Or what skills do you want for the students you serve, whether that's you as the educator or you as a family member? And these 10 traits rose to the top. And I kind of just love how they panned out because I think these 10 traits are a really beautiful intersection of sometimes what gets held as two different camps, social emotional learning and character development. And at CharacterStrong, we believe deeply in the intersection of the two. That social emotional learning are sort of the scaffold, the foundation upon which the behaviors of character are activated, right? We, for example, I believe it is hard to practice the behavior of kindness if people have not helped equip me with the social emotional skill of empathy. A powerful example that I wrote about in my new book coming out this fall called Deep Kindness. I read about the Sandy Hook shooting and how after the shooting happened, people from all over the world thought they were doing something kind by setting teddy bears. What ended up happening was Newtown, Connecticut ended up having to rent a 20,000 square foot warehouse to house all of the teddy bears they received. And one of the gentlemen who planned the candlelit vigil has this powerful quote where he says, "We had more teddy bears than there were people." He goes, "A stuffed animal is great, but a teddy bear doesn't pay for counseling and a teddy bear doesn't pay for a funeral." It's a humbling reminder to me that kindness without empathy sometimes serves me more than it does the person I'm trying to give it to. So we need both. All that to say, we need both. We need to teach the social emotional skills that allow me to reflect and be emotionally regulated and self-aware and perspective take. as well as the character traits of respect. How do I give respect to others? How do I give kindness to others? How do I cooperate well with others? And these things work in harmony. So these 10 traits we dive into in our toolkit. And the toolkit is broken down into these 10 traits here. And just to show you how they operate, we really dig in to each of these in a way that allows schools to make it totally their own. The toolkit, you'll start to notice here, is built in what we would call a mutually adaptive approach. It's not what we would call it, it's what the research would call it, what best practices would call it. The elementary level, what we learned was that a prescriptive approach, that 30-minute, maybe it's a push-in model, or you have to do it this time each week, we actually discovered was less effective than giving teachers autonomy over how and when they integrate it into their personal classrooms. So picture this like a nicely color-coded notebook for your brain. You scroll through and you'll notice the S here is part of a series of letters called our SERVE model. And that SERVE model is like these series of buckets that we put different activities into. The S stands for start intentionally. And so for each of these 10 traits, start intentionally includes a couple of things. Start the month, start the week, and start the day. Start the month would always be a conversation about common language. What trait are we talking about? Well, here's an example. Let's talk about courage. Courage, we say, is to choose what is good, right, and kind, even when it's hard or scary. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing even when we're scared. So we would talk about that. We would have a conversation about, what does courage mean to you? Share a moment as an educator where you think you've lived this definition well, or you've seen someone else live it well yourself. There's always going to be a couple of extensions, so you can go a little bit deeper if you wanted to with your group. And then you get in some fun stuff here. What does courage look like? We start each week with an image that's designed to evoke a conversation about whatever that trait is at hand. So why does, for example, this image teach you or say something to you about courage? And I love that the young people we serve typically have beautiful insights, perhaps well beyond whatever we could come up with, as to why things like this require courage. What does it look like to courageously stand up for others? What does it look like to pursue things that might be beyond your perceived abilities? What does it look like to maybe appear one way, but behind closed doors, or when no one else is looking, you show up in a totally different way? What does it look like to perform acts of kindness or selflessness or service when no one is paying attention? We went ahead and made these into line drawings as well, so you could use them as coloring books, mindful moments. And then you get down here into my favorite part of the content to start the day. We decided to start the day, and at first we were going to brainstorm a whole bunch of different quotes so that every day you'd have a new quote. But the wisdom of the people who helped put this together, they said, no, it's better if we go deeper. Let's take one quote and unpack it over the course of many days. So the idea would be you'd introduce the quote, let's say on a Tuesday, because on Monday you used an image to start the day. So on Tuesday, you introduce a quote. And you would on the first day, break it down into some vocabulary. On day 2, you'd unpack a biography. Who is this person? How have they lived a life of courage, for example? And then day 3 and day 4 are all about reflection and allowing young people to reflect on, how does this quote relate to me? How does it relate to making this an actionable part of my life? And we were hyper intentional here about getting quotes from a lot of different people all over the world. People who come from a variety of backgrounds and perspectives. So this first one, Paolo, is one of my favorite quotes. Be brave, take risks. Nothing can substitute experience. But you'll notice as you start to dig in a bit more, there's a whole lot of different perspectives. Nelson Mandela, to echo the sentiment we were talking about earlier, I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. So you get a chance to dig into a biography. Who was Nelson Mandela? Well, he was the first Black president elected in South Africa. Revolutionary who fought back against racism. Even though many people criticized or hurt him over the years, he showed courage by forgiving people so there could be more peace between different races in his country. Number 3, What are things you're afraid of? What would conquering that fear look like? Number 4, what would you accomplish if you took control of your own fear? What is one thing you could do to overcome that fear today? So ways to unpack that and dig into that. And of course, these are just prompts. You can adapt this and make it more relevant to your group, however you see that fit with your kids. You go a little bit further just so I can show you a few of these other quotes. And all of these, by the way, you click on them and they pop up on the screen. There's a spot to download them all at once so you can project them, you can print them, lots of ways to use these. But Oprah says, you get in life what you have the courage to ask for. By the way, fun fact, recently got a chance to meet Oprah, and she is a magical human being. I accidentally held her hand for a long period of time. Next time we visit, ask me more about that story. Quote 4 here comes from Frida. At the end of the day, we can endure much more than we think we can. And of course, number 5, a Buddhist teaching, having a soft heart in a cruel world is courage, not weakness. I love that idea and the ability to talk to young people about what it means to show up with a soft heart. What a cool concept to unpack with the young humans in your class. So that's start intentionally. So for each of the 10 traits, and then we break it out developmentally. So for classrooms, this is oriented towards grades K through 2, and this will be grades 3 through 5 as a totally different set of things. Of course, starting the month will always be the same. We'll keep coming back to that definition. And as you know, our definitions of words change over the course of our life. So each year, if you wanted to, you could come back to that as students move through the grades. And then you come down a little bit further and you'll notice there's a whole different set of images that are designed to think about what courage looks like. These are more oriented towards grades 3 through 5. And then you come down just a little bit further. We got Oprah, she's back. But different quote from her. Then you get into people like J.K. Rowling, Muhammad Ali, Vargas, and Malala. So that's an example of what start intentionally looks like. Let me show you a little bit more around the different parts of this SERVE model. In fact, let me go here into grades K through 2, courage, engage relationally. The E stands for engage relationally. The premise of this little category would be 1 to 10-minute activities and 10 to 20-minute activities. So we've broken them down so it's a little bit easier to get your brain around. Like, cool, I want to take this one because I only have 10 minutes, or I know my students can only hang with me for 10 minutes around this idea. So it's broken up that way. And there's a simple 3 activities for the 10 to 20-minute ones. For example, adapting Duck, Duck, Goose to become Courage, Courage, Fear. Or you come down here to 1 to 10-minute activities. London Bridge becomes Courage Bridge. Charades, that's not me. Some simple practical ways to engage in that. And you come down here to R, would be respond with empathy. Respond with empathy, the premise behind that would be not necessarily, it'd be thinking through the lens of what do our students need, and knowing that over the course of the day, sometimes our students are going to need a bit of a pump up, a brain booster, a moment of mindfulness to maybe recenter or calm down or navigate anxiety or big feelings. So the respond with empathy part of the toolkit is designed to give you some of those practical tools depending on what your student group needs. So maybe it's a mindful moment. So there's some practical mindfulness strategies built in here. There's some brain boosters here, including we have some videos we've sourced from around the internet that you can play, to use, to dance, to sing, some yoga pieces, some courage songs, and then here's some like real fast, literally like stand up at your chair. Here's one of my favorites, Courageous Countdown. Have students choose a number as a group between 3 and 10. Whatever number gets chosen, choose a movement for each number. The students have to do that number of times. For example, 7 shoulder wiggles, 6 jumping jacks, 5 high fives, and you have them review them all at once, say each number, pause in between to give the group time to do it. So some practical brain boosters that you can use to draw a line back to things like courage. And then at the bottom here, you have some scenarios of how would you empathetically engage with courage in moments like blank. So lots of tools in the respond with empathy. This one's more about responding to our student needs based on what you're noticing as the educator in the moment, but always being able to tie that back to the trait at the time. The V stands for values practice consistently. The idea behind this would be a little bit more of your traditional lesson plan. Typically anywhere between like 10 to 30 minutes. These are going to be more of an experiential activity, a game of some kind, an activity of some sort. And at the far side of those, the thing that sets values practice consistently apart, maybe from other parts of the toolkit, is intentional debrief, right? So some discussion questions that allow people to grapple with learning around what this trait actually sounds like, feels like, experiences like in our life. So stand up if, for example, invite students to stand up if they're scared of the prompt you give. Here's some examples you can use, followed by questions you could use to process with them. There's courage corral, or the courage walk. This is actually one of my favorite activities. Get students on one side of the room, all facing the same direction. And the premise is everyone has to move through the space in a unique way and talk about what it looks like to be willing to stand alone. Why is that sometimes an act of courage? What does it mean to be uniquely yourself? Why is that an act of courage? What does it look like to encourage other people who are crossing themselves? Why is that an act of courage? So there's lots of different things to obviously unpack in there, and one of those practical sort of games. And some of the feedback we've gotten from students is that they love the games and they love being able to tie those games back to something that feels purposeful and meaningful. And finally, the E and the SERVE model stands for exit intentionally. So if we're going to open to thoughtfully, then how do we close out our day thoughtfully? And in the same sort of format as start intentionally, we're going to exit the month by looping back to that definition, seeing if we've learned anything new. Exit the week, and these are practical ways to close out an entire week's worth of learning with some simple strategies to think about how do you reflect meaningfully on the week or experience something at the end of the week that'll allow you to go into the weekend or the next week with some thoughtful learning. And then exit the day, which would be what are like the fast, quick wins that you could get at the end of the day. So K2, exit intentionally could be teach the students to chant, fear, fear out of my way, we choose courage today. Or maybe it's a quick sentence stems where you have students fill in the blank to celebrate a peer themselves. I admire blank because they showed courage by blank. I showed courage today when blank, or one thing I learned about courage today was blank. I was just on a call the other day with a school who was looking to implement this, and they said, you know, we have limitations on our time. So are these things that we can integrate into stuff we're already doing? And it turned out that they're already doing morning circles and evening circle or afternoon circles. So they already start and end the day in circles. Wouldn't it be cool if to integrate into that practice, you had 30-second or 1 or even 5-minute activities that related to a central theme that you're going after for that month? So in year 1 of implementation, a school might just do that, might just tackle the starting and closing circle. If that's a practice or a habit you've already established, and you can just be more intentional with that thing you're already doing to tie it back to some of your school mission, motto, values. So that's the SERVE model. And people always very naturally have questions of like, okay, well, these are broken up developmentally. What does that mean for implementation? Are students going to repeat activities or something like it? To which we say, we got you covered. For example, we've built out these implementation plans where you're able to go in and check out a couple of different options. It's designed as a toolkit model in the sense of, wouldn't it be great if we could just have this cool repository of resources I can dip into at any time? But for schools who want to get really hyper-focused on fidelity of that implementation, well, here's a couple of approaches. One is the flexible model, which means you can pull at it sort of as you need to. And it's sort of like a, maybe not necessarily a daily practice, but a sort of a drip practice. And so this would be for all students, all grades are using these things from the SERVE model and referencing these books. But kindergarten would work on these activities. First on these activities, second grade on these, so on and so forth. So that's flexible implementation. We also have a plan for short daily implementation. So if you truly wanted to weave this into the daily fabric of your school, your classrooms, your pedagogy, awesome. Well, here's what it would look like. On Monday, start with this. On Tuesday, do this short activity. On Wednesday, try this mindful moment. And it's broken up by grade level to allow you to get quick access to digging into this on a daily, small implementation, bite-sized implementation. So week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, and then the final version of implementation that's been pre-prepared for you is a weekly model. Sometimes this just feels more familiar for schools. We're used to sort of that 20 to 30 minute model on a weekly basis. Maybe you've already built that into a schedule. Awesome. If that's the case, then week 1 lesson for kindergarten is going to look like these 3 things. Grade 1, these 3 things. For week 1, so on and so forth. And it provides some supplementary materials as well. Speaking of resources, let me show you around that spot just a little bit. In the resources, you'll find implementation plans. What I just showed you for flexible, daily, and weekly lives in all 10 of our traits. And that is designed for the schools that want to make sure that sort of there's fidelity across the board, make it easier for teachers to plan themselves. So it's sort of a click and go kind of thing. But it also makes sure that you'll never repeat an activity grade to grade. That being said, if you do repeat an activity, CharacterStrong, we're big believers, we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught. And the way I might experience an activity in kindergarten is going to be very different from 2nd grade. So if you're into that, we believe totally that it's okay to re-experience those things, but these implementation plans allow for you to make sure that there are no repeats along the way. You go down a bit further, there's some small pre and post assessments. There's sort of fun, practical ways to take a quick pulse. And we always try to focus these, it's sort of a 2-part piece, which is culture and climate focus on a higher level, as well as the actual sort of pulse formative assessment on how students are doing with that trait. So for example, this question is actually consistent across all 10 traits. We just think it's an important relational practice to check in. Do you have an adult that you know that cares about you? And what's one thing you wish your teacher knew? So just a practical emotional snapshot of how your students are doing. And then it would take you into a bit of a assessment. Let me see if I can pull that up for you so you can see what that looks like. Just one moment. And here it is. So there's that first page, but you scroll down a bit more. Here's the little mini strategy called Daring Doodles. Draw a picture of a time you showed courage. You can include captions, labels, or a title. And then of course, there's a post assessment on the far side of that that looks a little bit different. And here they are for another example here. This one was one version, and here's another one, the 4-corner self-evaluation. This is a post assessment, as well as a 3 through 5 post assessment. Come down a bit further, and you'll notice that we have alignments pre-set up. If that is relevant in your district, where you want to make sure that you're aligning to things like the ASCA standards or the CASEL standards, awesome. We'll check it out. Every single one of these categories have been aligned to the ASCA mindsets and behaviors. Each activity we've tagged with the appropriate alignments. And if you scroll way down in this PDF, you'll notice there's CASEL alignments as well. So we've tagged each of these with the relevant of the CASEL 5 that they tag themselves into. And then you scroll all the way to the bottom here, and you'll notice you can download all posters all at once, and you can download all illustrations all at once. So simple ways for you to integrate those things without too many clicking around or having to click and save in every single lesson. It's all in one place to make it a bit easier for you. A few other thoughts, and then I want to dig into some questions if folks have them as we go. One of the things that we're really excited to share is we've been working so that this coming school year, you'll also have access to pre-K. Pre-K materials, which we know a lot of schools serve, and that's a huge need. And we want to start them as young as we can with this stuff. So we've developed some tools around pre-K that'll automatically, if you're already a current user, will be made available to you, and anyone who's purchasing now. All those will come into the toolkit. It's not a separate thing that you have to purchase. Pre-K will live in those trait toolbars that you're seeing on the site. And the way we set up our pre-K toolkits is we have classroom starters. We have activities of varying lengths. And then we have enders. So simple ways to end the day. We also have built for pre-K as well as K through 5, we have reading lists with pre-populated lists of books that relate to each topic. And in our pre-K toolkit, what we're really excited to share is for those read alouds, for those books, we've designed activities around them specifically. So in addition to what I just showed you here with gratitude, our pre-K book list will have activities related to each of these books. So you can see a list pre-populated here that you can click on, and it'll take you right to an opportunity to purchase. And one of the changes we'll be making over the summer is adding links where we find read alouds available on the internet. So in case you don't want to buy the book, an opportunity to have the read aloud available. Okay, a couple final thoughts and then let's jump into questions. I'll look here at Courage K through 2 Home. One of the things that we believe in deeply is sort of the holistic perspective of making sure that we are serving not just our students, but role modeling this from an adult perspective as well. So a couple categories of adults that we can serve are families and our staff. So let's take families first. We've created Letters Home to allow you to dig into this work and partner with the other people in your community and the families that you serve. The family Letters Home include an explanation of what we're talking about, some conversation starters about what you could share or questions you could ask related to the topic. There's some opportunities for application. So those are books that they could read as a family if they'd like to. There's activities they could do as a family. There's personal development, 9 Ways to Cultivate Courage in Kids by parenting expert Dr. Michelle Borba. This is something that if you send this out digitally is a link that they can travel to themselves, which by the way, the team will drop right now into the chat, a webinar I'm doing next week with Dr. Michelle Borba. She's a best-selling author of the book Unselfie. She's been featured a number of times on Good Morning America, on the Today Show. She's an incredible expert on cultivating empathy in young people and in all people. And that webinar will be free next week with Dr. Michelle Borba. She's awesome. And then the final piece of the puzzle here is Purposeful Pursuits. These are challenges that you offer to your families that they can do together to role model what courage looks like as a family. So this one's called Neighborhood Portraits. Who are the people in your neighborhood? Work together to draw a family portrait, then step out in courage and find a neighbor that you don't know yet. Introduce yourselves and have your child introduce everyone using the family picture you drew together. Now, does this guarantee that all families do this? Of course not. But what we believe deeply in at CharacterStrong is the more opportunities we provide for people to practice the kind of pro-social behaviors or skill sets that we want to see, well, the more we increase the likelihood of cultivating that skill over time. So we just believe in consistently providing opportunities, and that would mean that for each of these traits, families get offered 4 weeks of practical exercises that they could do together as a family. And you can go ahead and download those letters home, both in English and in Spanish, so that you can be sending that out to families digitally or physically, whatever works best for you. As I mentioned, we also believe in the adults in the building role modeling this work. We are huge proponents of that. Dr. Clayton Cook at the University of Minnesota, who we work with closely, says when it comes to school culture change, we are first and foremost in the business of adult behavior change. And so we try to do everything we can to equip adults to role model this to the young people that they work with. So here's some examples of purposeful pursuits for staff, which would mean as an implementation team or a principal in the building, you could send these out weekly to the staff and offer them an exercise to practice these things. Here's an example of one that I like a lot, affirming the example this week, listening for stories that provide strong examples of courage and bravery. Maybe a staff member who shares something in the lounge, maybe it's a story that was showcased on the local news or popped into your social media feed. Send an email or a handwritten note to that person, thanking them for being a model of courage, affirming their courage, and if appropriate, asking if you can share their story of courage with your students. So a cool way for us as adults to be prompted into action. Let's thank someone for their courageous voice or activity or activism. And then how cool would it be if you shared that with your students? Hey, here's this person that I thanked for their courage. And this is what they said back, or this is why I thanked them, to role model what it looks like to live it out ourselves. Final thing I want to share with you in terms of the toolkit here is playground tools. As we know, challenging behaviors increase on the playground. Of course, this will look different in some situations coming back to school, but we just wanted to offer practical ways to engage on the playground and bring these traits to life. Here's one of my favorites. It's the Peace Labyrinth. Have students walk into the labyrinth of the conflict, and as they walk through, they navigate a variety of stages. This comes from a variety of places. I first saw one live through our friend Barbara Gruner, who's a 35-year counselor in Texas, still is a presenter with CharacterStrong. She helped build this curriculum. She helped build the elementary, the pre-K curriculum. She's one of our personal heroes and friends, and she had this painted. She had one of these painted out on her playground, and she explained to me how it was used to help students navigate challenging conversations. And boy, could we use some peace labyrinths in our world right now. State the problem, move to the next stop, talk about their feelings, move to the farthest point away from each other, state the other person's feelings, and as you move closer together, you start to brainstorm ideas to solve the problem. Moving into the closest part of the circle, that's the opportunity to choose the best. This is a stop for chance for students to solve their conflict. Sometimes this means rock, paper, scissors. Other times it means agreeing to disagree or coming up with a solution that's collaborative. And here's how it is explained. All those things are available for you to download along the way. You'll notice some other practical ideas here as well. Now, I just gave you a lot, and I spent most of my time digging into K2 and didn't even get to 3-5. But I just wanted to show you all that just lives in courage. And that means that schools can tackle this in lots of ways. I was on a phone call earlier this week from a woman named Jess out of Ripon School District in Wisconsin. They pulled together some beautiful feedback that we're going to continue to integrate over time into our work. And they did 3 10-week cycles where each week they took a different character trait, got through all 10, and then they started at the beginning again. I thought that was a really cool model. We've seen other schools say, you know what? We're already focused on respect and kindness and honesty. So we're just going to dig into those 3 this year, sink our teeth in, and think about something different for year 2. Or maybe it's, I want to choose the top 8 traits that resonate most with our school, our needs, and we're going to unpack that over the course of this school year. It's designed truly as a toolkit model, knowing that every building is different, every building has different needs, but we've done as much work as we can and will continue to provide tools so that we make that work easier on schools to execute the implementation. So it's customizable with all the tools in place if you want to be guided or have some of that heavy lifting done to make sure implementation is as accessible as possible for your staff. Whew. That's where I'm going to start and stop today for me speaking towards you. I will show you 1 or 2 other little quick things just because I think they're so fun. I'm going to come in here into empathy. I just want to show you a couple other images just to hopefully inspire your own conversations. Here's some of my favorites. For example, the cheetah and the sloth. Great example of empathy. Come down here, we have a quote by Barack Obama, Susan Sarandon, Oprah's a popular one here, Ruben Roy, Maya Angelou. This is a good intersection of courage and empathy. But just wanted to show you one of the cool things that we tried to do was source illustrators from all over the country so that those illustrations look different. You'll notice that the styles of these illustrations are quite different from each other, which was an intentional move in order to bring forward a lot of different voices, a lot of different perspectives so that we could think about it in different ways. All right, let's dig in to what we got here. I'm gonna come back to overview. Cool. And give me a second to pull up my questions. Awesome. Thanks everyone for being here, by the way. I would love in the chat, if you're up for it and interested, which thing did I share so far that resonates with your sort of school or your need the most. Maybe it's the trait that you'd most be looking forward to unpacking. Maybe it's the, like, I love the staff challenges or the family pursuits. Let me know in the chat what sort of resonates with you. And then in a moment, we'll ask what else do you think would be helpful to you that you're not seeing here. Someone says, I want to paint a peace labyrinth. I do too. I want to paint a peace labyrinth around the world so we can figure out how to navigate the world a little bit more effectively right now. Where do you find playground ideas? All of it, implementation guides, staff challenges. Awesome. Unpacking of the quotes, alignment to ASCA standards. Pre-K, yeah, let's go pre-K. Awesome. Let me see if I can answer a couple of questions. Someone asks, how can I explain to my administrator the curriculum and program and how it weaves the topics of racial and inequalities and racism? Awesome. Thank you for bringing the question up. Obviously, it's a question that we can and should be asking probably in just about every lane that our lives operate in right now. So here's a couple of ways that I can answer that. The first one is we've been working for many years now with a few partners, among them one of my heroes, Erin Jones. I was a longtime educator and consultant in the equity space, and she's done a full audit on our secondary curriculum and has been working with us to audit our elementary curriculum as well. That audit is designed to, well, first of all, when we built the elementary curriculum, we'd already learned a lot about some of that work, how to be more culturally responsive, how to make sure that our language was culturally responsive and thoughtful and rooted in best equity practices. That said, there's always room for improvement. So she's going through right now, and we're working together to do another audit on our content to make sure that we're continually being responsive to those needs. One of the things that we just talked about recently was unpacking some of those words. So actually including in the toolkit some practical strategies to have some of those tougher conversations, which is one of her gifts. And we have a couple other people in our network that we're going to work alongside to do that really well. So for example, some of our quotes come from people who we mentioned in their biography are activists for X, Y, or Z. And one of the pieces of feedback earlier was like, well, what does it mean to be an activist? How do you explain that to young people? So what we're going to do is in those definitions, if it says something like activist and we know it's something that requires a bit more unpacking, awesome. You're going to click on that word and it'll take you to a toolkit that allows you to research or have some more access to tools that help you unpack that with your students. So what does it mean to think about activism as a kindergarten, as a third grader, and being able to dig into those conversations in a way that feels guided? I know some people's biggest challenge right now is like, if I don't know what to say, I'm not going to say anything at all. And what we continue to learn is that that is not effective. It's not an excuse. To not know what to say is silence, and that silence isn't helpful. It's not moving the needle forward. So providing tools in that toolkit to engage in those more challenging conversations is some of the updates that we're working on over the course of this summer. Another update that we're trying to push forward is increasing the number of quotes that we have. I love the quotes that we've provided and want to continue to amplify voices from a whole lot of different diverse perspectives. So one of our commitments is to continue to add to those tools so that students can see and be informed by different types of voices in order to amplify and have representation from all sorts of students and be provided with hope and inspiration from people that look like them, sound like them, and people that don't. So those are a couple of things that will maybe hopefully help connect. But if you have deeper questions about that, feel free to book a call with us and we'd love to unpack that a bit more. Someone asks, how much does the curriculum cost? Great question. We designed it in this toolkit model. We wanted to make it super accessible for schools. And so the upfront cost is $14.99. And that would be the first year, get you onboarded into our system. And then it's $4.99 for every year after that, for as long as you want to maintain access to the online platform. And that online platform, hopefully as evidenced by today, we're constantly updating, adding new things to pre-K resources, activism resources, equity conversation resources, all those things. The beauty of it being online and not a binder is we don't have to reprint thousands of things. When we get feedback from people, we try to hear that, respond to that, and update the curriculum as needed. So you'll always get the most up-to-date version. There's no V2 that you're waiting on or have to repurchase. That being said, you can bundle the elementary with other items. So we do offer professional development in buildings. We do a half-day model and a full-day model, and we do those in person as well as virtual. So you can bundle professional development alongside our on-demand PD, as well as our CharacterStrong gym, which just so you have a sense of what that gym looks like, because it is an option to bundle with. Let's go in here just as a quick example to the activity library. This is one thing that lives in the CharacterStrong gym, and it's a simple way to search for activities. Here, let's do a K2 activity that's 1 to 10 minutes long, that serves groups of 3 to 10, that's low risk, that's an energizer, right? So I can literally get that granular in tagging things, and these different activities suit themselves to that grade level, those tags that I've selected. We do the same thing with a video library that allows us to very quickly access. Let's say I want a video that talks about empathy, and I want it to be good for K to 2 or 3 to 5. Here we go. Here's the videos that are related to that. I don't want the video to be too long though. And I want it to be related to leadership, right? So it can get as granular as that. And you'll see some if you tag lots of things, might be 2 videos, but some you might find, oh, here's cool 10 videos that relate to the students that I'm serving in this grade level. So people are asking that $1,499 is a school site license for year 1, and it's $499 for the years after that. But we do work with districts all the time if you're interested in district pricing as an example. Let's see. What type of PD or consultation is available over the course of the year or a few years to districts or schools that are implementing this for the first time? Great question. We do regional trainings where we bring people together. Typically it serves implementation teams. So anywhere from sometimes 3 to 5, but we've had schools send their entire staff, which is really awesome. And those days are one level of professional development that we offer to think about implementation over a 3 to 5 year timeline. And then we offer in-building professional development, and that in-building could be in building, it could be in district, and that is a 3-hour day or a 6-hour day, virtually or in person, where we dig into clarity, competence, and consistency. We talk about school culture at large and how the work that we're doing with this tool is going to impact that. How to do it thoughtfully, how to make sure we're speaking a common language, and making sure that you're oriented with the tools. How do you suggest a school district unfolds this program? That's a great question. One of the things that we try to answer in those regional trainings is that sort of implementation thought. And we recommend thinking about this in a 3 to 5 year timeline, which is what implementation says. It takes for something to stick. And our biggest recommendation is don't try to do everything, because if trying to do everything, you end up doing nothing very well. So find the minimum baseline that you know is going to create fidelity across the board. So is that just, let's start with the start intentionally? Or is that, let's just start with the staff work for the first year and literally start to role model this with our adults before we even start delivering this in the class? Or maybe we take this one piece from the classroom model and just work with families and adults. So there's lots of ways to tackle it depending on staff readiness. And we have some tools. If you want to email us directly, we have some tools to help survey some of that staff readiness, get some of that data, because we know that if we don't have staff readiness, if we don't have that staff buy-in, then it's not time to implement anything. in which case we can also be a resource to help increase the likelihood that implementation is going to go well by doing some of that professional development work ahead of time. I'm at an international school. How does the curriculum or resources address kids living in a culture that is different from their own? It's a great question. And I think that that is what social emotional learning and character is designed to do, right? So you think about some of the traits. In fact, I'll return to them right now. You look over here, some of these traits, let's just think about the context of I'm living in a different place than my own. Well, what's that going to require? It's first and foremost going to require empathy. It's going to require a deep level of respect. And then it's going to require cooperation, as well as a level of responsibility. So my short answer to that would be, this is the plate, right? This is the foundational work that we need to do in order for students like that to be successful where they're at. I don't know if there's any particular lesson that addresses that use case specifically, but I really believe that the traits are designed, and the toolkit is designed in such a way that you can unpack them based on what your student need is, that you can have those meaningful conversations by digging into these different topics. Do you have experience using these materials in the current distance learning model? Super good question. We're actually going to do a blog post soon with one of our users who has been using it in the distance learning model, and they're using it in really beautiful ways. So what's cool about the resources that we have is that we can send out those quotes, right? They're really visual and simple ways to put it out to a distance learning environment. We have videos that are built in that you can send out, and the blog that'll be coming out soon will talk about how this in particular teacher has done it themselves. That being said, our commitment organizationally is, as you're coming back to school come this fall, whether that is in person or virtually, we are creating resources very intentionally that are designed to focus on what we know students are going to need the most as they come back, and making sure that those resources are adaptable to be in person or virtual. So long story short, we got your back. We're going to make sure that you are equipped to do this, that we're not just going to hand you a toolkit and say, figure it out yourself. We're going to build a lot of resources to take that burden or that heavy lifting off of your shoulders. Let's see here. Are the posters that define the character traits available to purchase to post in our classrooms? They're all free, and they are they are part of the toolkit, and they're in high resolution as PDFs. So if you want to be printing those at your own school or use a local printing company to print those off, those are yours to do what you want with. In fact, we love seeing schools that print them off in big poster size and put them wherever they want. But it's also cool that they can be projected, or if you have TVs in your halls, they can be put up on the TVs. Lots of ways to integrate those images because they do come to you high resolution. Someone just asked in the chat, who is Krista? This is a good question. We actually have our team online right now. Krista is an amazing award-winning educator from Arizona who joined our team about a year ago. She's a content beast, and she's one of our school support specialists. So if you get a chance to work with Krista, you might work with her through professional development. You might work with her on an implementation call, or you might get a more passive touch, which is from all the content that she creates. So that's Krista who's answering your questions, as well as Dalton, who has taken 6 cross-country tours in an RV, performing acts of kindness all around the country. And he is another one of our school support specialists who mobilizes people to join these trainings and helps coordinate with schools to bring this work to life in your district. So it's likely that you could hear from either of them. And they're both really rad people and my friends. Thanks for asking, Adrian. I appreciate that question. Let's see here. Do you have a survey for baseline data? We don't provide a specific survey. We have those pre and post assessments that you can use on a trait by trait basis. We do have some surveys. If you want to email us directly, info@characterstrong.com. We have some staff readiness surveys that we can send out to you. And we partner with a few organizations. In fact, we just recently partnered with Panorama, who does some amazing data work, measurement work in this space, that you could work with them to get some of that data. But send us a note if you have more questions on gathering some of that, because we'd have some good ideas on the sort of questions that you'd want to ask, or the partners that we'd point you in the direction of, so you can be served in that way. Can I get a recording that I can watch or share with my teachers? Absolutely. We always post our past webinars on our site. In fact, the team will link that here in the chat. They'll link to all the past webinars. So you can visit that page at any time. And anytime we do a webinar like this, whether it's more curricular focused or like next week's where we're talking with Dr. Michelle Borba, all those are available for free on our site, so you can access them anytime. As the SPED teacher at the elementary, do you suggest an additional type of implementation when my SPED kids come to my group? I do a social group 30 minutes per day. Should I use the exact same implementation, or do you have additional resources for SPED? Great question. The toolkit is designed in such a way that it allows you to plug and play as you see fit. So we don't have specifically additional resources for SPED. And we think about like, okay, what are we doing on a tier 1 level? And then what can schools do to customize that approach for what other sort of interventions they're trying to work with. That said, a lot of the resources are designed for all students. So how can we still have those conversations about those quotes? Do the videos still suit your need? Does this activity make sense for the students that you work with? And we built it in such a way that there's such a robust amount of tools that my guess is if you were to dig into that toolkit for even just a few minutes, you'll find the tools that make sense for the group and the specific students that you serve, knowing that in SPED, there's a whole range of needs and types of students that you get to work with. So let me know, actually, if you're able to dig into the toolkit. And by the way, I'm going to drop a link here to our samples page that you can download a sample. And when you download a sample, you actually get access to a full entire month. So you'd get all of Courage, and the team will drop into the link right into the chat right now, a link to the samples. So you can check that out. And I don't see a name attached to that question, but I would love if you wanted to contact me once you take a look at that sample. Let me know if you think that there's a gap that we could work to fill. And I would love to work with you on that. Krista just dropped into the chat right now a link to get a hold of those samples. How do you suggest the school district unfolds this program? That is an implementation question. We're on phone calls all the time dealing with the specific building needs of implementation. So there's 2 links that I want to point you to that are in the chat. The first one, Krista has already dropped, but I'm going to redrop right here. This is a link to our calendar where you can book a call. And that call, we can talk specifically about your building and the needs you have. And then I'm going to drop a link to our June 18th, a new date that we added literally today. We've worked with thousands of educators virtually over the past few months. Just 2 days ago, we had over 600 people from around the world on one of our implementation training days, a school culture training day. And so if you're able to make it to that, that outlines a really thoughtful approach to holistic implementation, thinking about it on a 3 to 5 year timeline and thinking about it through what we call our 4 core components, the things that we can control in a school to make sure implementation is most effective. So please join us at that day. We would love to have you. And then there's a comment. I have to say this, I have many years of counseling and social work experience. I have no idea how you put this all together, but it's amazing. You're God sent to the field of promoting improved mental health and resilience by helping each of us teach the skills the kids need in order to make it in a tough world. I'm gonna cry. Thank you. That's the work. We believe in it very much, and we're thrilled to build tools. We know that educators are incredibly passionate. We also know that they don't have a lot of time, and it is really the building of these things in a structured way that takes the time. So that's a huge compliment. Thank you. And we want to provide and empower you with the tools to do exactly that, serve the mental wellness of our students, of ourselves, and teach the skills that we know are foundational to a more connected, compassionate world. People are asking, is there a Spanish version? Yeah, we have translations of those family letters home, and coming into this next school year, all of those quotes will be translated as well. So the things that are student facing, we have and will have available in Spanish. Also, just a quick shout out to Kingwood Elementary School, who have a bunch of teachers who are volunteering their time to be here. Shout out Kingwood. Thanks for showing up. Shout out to everyone here for being a part of this today. And the final link that I'll point you to, Krista posted it here, but I'm gonna put it here again. It's a CharacterStrong educator group. Krista also helps host that CharacterStrong educator group. We have nearly 4,000 educators in that group, and we're constantly posting things there to support teachers. And then teachers are serving and helping other teachers, especially if you're coming from a school that's using our work, so that you can all work together to do this even better. We'll drop the link to our past webinars in just a second, but just so you know, you can always find those at CharacterStrong.com. And if you want to navigate it piece by piece, CharacterStrong.com, resources, lots of cool resources here. But I'll go to webinar and live trainings, and you'll notice just down here, there's a button to select past webinars. And all of our webinars live there. All right, we're right on time, everyone. That's 12 o'clock my time. I don't know what time it is for you. But I hope you have a beautiful Thursday. If you have any other questions, please feel free to book a call. We will send out a follow-up with a link to a bunch of the things that we mentioned today, as well as a link to the replay from today. So look out for that. And please join us for our June 18th training. We have some more trainings coming up in July, as well as a 2-day conference in August. All of this good stuff. We're working really hard to serve you the best we can, to come back to school relationally, to teach these skills that we know are going to change our culture and change the world for the better. Thanks for showing up, and we'll see you again very soon.